live. Thank you, everybody, for showing up. Roboclops, thanks for joining us. Astrofish, Grant, Christian, Sarah, always lovely to see all of you, all of your names, all of your faces, all of you people in the chat room. Thank you again for coming and joining me on Friday for another day of some sound reverse engineering, recreation, something like that. This is Voltage Control Lab. I'm Joe, also known as Computo. Um, at Voltage Control Lab on Instagram, Voltage Control Lab on YouTube. You probably found us. Um, at V Control Lab on Twitter. And you can find me at Computo on pretty much everything. That's weird. It looked like everybody dropped out for a second there. But thanks for showing up. Brian, what's up? Um, as I said, I'm Joe. This is Voltage Control Lab. Um, I'm a music producer and sound designer and educator from Los Angeles, California. And I currently teach at Musicians Institute in Hollywood and Icon Collective, which is located up in Burbank. And I see a couple of former students in here, and always fantastic to see you guys. And Astrofish, if you want to hear some of my music, you can look me up on SoundCloud, Spotify, or anywhere else as Computo. Computo at Computo on pretty much everything. And I'm also a member of a band called The Blessed Oscillator with our good friend Victor, who's currently being replaced by the Dancing Baby, at least until the Corona situation is resolved, and also with Dave Harrow, who is one of my um, electronic music idols. I have to say, we've been very, very lucky to Victor and I to get to work with David. And if you guys want to go check out David Harrow's work, you can of course go and check us out at theblessedoscillator.bandcamp.com. You can also find our work on Spotify. And Dave Harrow is a legendary producer and composer. He produced Anne Clark. He was a protege of Lee Scratch Perry. If you go look up Dave Harrow on discogs.com, is it, or .org, Discogs, uh, I've never seen the kind of credits list that this fellow has. So, you might want to go and check out Dave Harrow. He's also longtime collaborator with The Orb. He was just on the new Orb album that was released a couple of weeks ago. I mean, if you know The Orb, come on, it's like one of the quintessential electronic music acts of the '90s and up until today. Dr. Alex Patterson's influence, I think, is hard to measure. I don't think dubstep would exist without the Orb, even though it's not really dubstep. He really helped to keep the dub sound alive in the '90s and the 2000s and the last decade. So go check out the Orb. Go check out Dave Harrow. Go check out the Blessed Oscillator. And if you get a chance after all that, you can go check out Computo. And you'll probably be partially, um, maybe somewhat pleased, maybe somewhat disgusted. We'll see. We'll see how you feel about Computo. There's varying styles and all that stuff. So we'll see what you think if you find it. Today we are talking about sound recreation and reverse engineering. So if you guys have any sounds you want to recreate, if you want to remind me of sounds that we might have discussed last week, um, by all means, toss those names and artist and track names in the chat, please. I just ate a um, microwaved scrambled egg. I don't know if you guys know you can do that. You can crack a couple of eggs in a mug and scramble them up. You can put some cheese and some meat in there, and then you can microwave it for, 30 seconds, and then 30 more seconds, and then 30 more seconds, and it tastes like a pretty damn good scrambled egg. So, quick disaster cooking lesson for us all. Maybe we'll do that on a show. Okay. Well, we got the dancing baby, we got Nyan Cat, and we got a room full of wonderful chat people. And so let's get into it. I have one track that was sent to me last week that we can start with. And Cubanate. Oh, let's see. Let's do that one second. I'll look that up in just a minute. Was that on the Voltage Control Lab page? I think so. Let me just bring that up here. There's HR Terror. Okay. Isolation. That's the one. Okay, sweet. Oh, Wax Tracks. Sick. 1998. Hell yeah, taking it back. Okay, so let's start though with this track by Side Piece, Wanna See You. And Christian submitted me this one to me last week, so this should be interesting. Let's share the right screen. That would help. Let me move you guys down here. On modular. Okay, cool. I got the modular turned on, so we'll try to do that today. This thing does not want to. There we go. Boom. Now I got you guys down here. Okay, so let's share the screen. Maybe the first one we'll do in the software, maybe with Splice. We'll do it with Serum or something. In fact, that reminds me I should open my Splice app. That way Serum will work. By the way, maybe I'll just mention this. You guys know you can go and rent plugins to own on Splice, right? I'm not the biggest Splice fan in general. I don't particularly like the idea of an endless supply of samples. Could be a useful thing at times. I don't necessarily find it to be the most useful or education friendly thing in terms of making sounds, and I think there's some other there's a lot of potential for other issues with Splice. But and recently we had this fiasco where a Justin Bieber track came out and was the main instrumental melody in the first few minutes or minute of the track was a Splice acquired melody. If you guys don't know what Splice is, it's an online marketplace for sample libraries. And if you have a membership with them, a monthly membership, you can download samples from Splice. But apparently, in recent times, months, years, publishers have become wary of Splice because of the exact scenario I'm mentioning right now. Justin Bieber used, well, not Justin Bieber, but his producers used a melody that was purchased off of Splice. And then another artist who was of a lower caliber of popularity, let's say, called out Justin Bieber online for stealing his melody. Of course, this artist also was not really, clearly not a part of the production process. Otherwise, he would have known that this was a Splice sample. But he, as the artist, the singer in this situation, probably had little to do with the production of the track, just like Bieber, and thought that that was a melody he owned and that it was sampled from his track. right? In fact, it was made by a producer in England who is a sample library maker, right? He's a producer, and for extra money, he sells samples that he makes on Splice for anyone to buy. They're royalty free samples. They give you access to uh, um, a shit ton of sounds for very, very low price. But imagine the problem here, right? It worked out for this producer who made the sample library because he gained some notoriety as a result of the fiasco that ensued online between Bieber and this other artist. But uh, usage is included, of course, absolutely. These are royalty free samples, effectively. But ponder this problem, right? Artist X uses a sample, and it's not a sample really; it's a melody. This is where it all kind of falls to shit, right? You buy a melody off of Splice, right? A loop, effectively, but it's a melodic loop, right? And then Diplo goes and uses one of those, or Justin Bieber goes and uses one of those. What's going to happen then? Somebody's getting a sample licensing, or rather a what should we call it? A content ID flag, right? What happens when our song has a melody in it and then someone else's song has a melody in it, and those songs are uploaded to the internet? It's kind of a who got it first type of scenario, right? What about publishing? How are we gonna know whose track is being used where if the content ID systems, these stupid AI systems that don't know one way or the other, uh, um, start flagging tracks that have the same melody in them? You'd think, yes, it gets copywritten, right? But what happens when you buy the same melody off of Splice a year later, right? Of course, YouTube's going to still flag everyone using it. Who wins in that situation? Is it somewhat popular artist X, or is it super popular artist Y? Right? Who is going to win out on that battle? You can best believe it's going to be the super popular artist, and everyone else who's using that shit is going to be absolutely fucked. So, um, this is this is the scenario that we're dealing with right now. This is the landscape of music production that we're dealing with today. It also yields people who put out music and they have no clue what goes into the music making process, right? Like they don't know what it's like to write a melody. The guy who wrote the great melody that everyone wants just sold it down the river for $10 a month rather than holding on to that great melody and taking it to the artist who is going to pay them to use it, right? If you're going to do that, sell it on BeatStars or sell it somewhere on a marketplace that you can maintain some ownership of that musical idea. If it's a sample of your dog barking, who cares? But if it's a sample of, or a loop in a sense, of a melody you wrote on the keyboard, don't piss it away on Splice. This is one of a growing number of examples of problems that can come out of this. So I'm just warning you guys. Be careful. I'm not trashing Splice. I know that there is plenty of legitimate use for Splice, even on a collaborative level. Um, the 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 what am I trying to say? Sorry, I got distracted by the chat again. Even on a collaborative level, Splice is very useful. You can share projects. It will, if you install it and you're using the project sharing functionality, it will save versions of your projects that you can recall, which is really nice. Otherwise, you'd have to do a save as every time and rename your project and do this whole thing. Um, it does give good royalties from downloads, and for I think for the common producer selling your material through Splice, especially if you can find a way to make that material attractive to people, right? Sounds.com, which was Native Instruments' response to Splice, I suppose. Also had a great royalty payment system, but the problems start to crop up in these other areas where ownership of something becomes complicated, and we're reaching a point very, very soon here where the whole copyright game is going to have to be rethought. And obviously, as Brian mentions here, YouTube and the existing content creators, the asset owners, don't want it to change because it will mean a loss for them. So, this is the Disneys of the world, but it's also the Bridgeport Musics of the world. It's also, you have to consider what happens to a record label. This is a great reason to be very wary of working with record labels that are less than on their game. Record labels are just like any other business. They exist to create content, to create a product, to accumulate assets. And what happens when the business goes out of business? What happens when the owner decides, I don't like to do this anymore? Or someone shows up and starts offering them money for their business? Well, they sell the assets, right? You are selling the assets that you've collected for your business off to some other business. What are the assets owned by a record company? Your music. So if you want your music to be protected, if you want your work to not fall into the hands of asset collectors like these vulture labels, right? They're not even labels; they're just collectors of intellectual property. Then you have to be careful who you sign your work to. You have to be careful about signing your work away to a label and giving up your ownership of that work. But that's what a lot of labels are going to want. So you got to be careful. You got to look out for yourself. This is why a lot of people have turned back around to just selling their work on their own. It's harder, demands we do other parts of the job. But, just some words of caution. We got to be careful about who we sign our work away to because they could just turn it around and give it to someone else. And yeah, and with the DMCA, and these other legislative boondoggles, we are largely left out in the cold by the bigger asset holding corporations. So, this is why people turn to Bandcamp. This is why people self-release. So, um, anyway, enough of Joe's cautionary tales here. Let's get into some sound design and talk about this. I think that was all in a roundabout way of telling you that you could pay $10 a month to own Serum or other plugins through Splice, and the great thing is you can turn it off at any time. I bought Vocal Synth 2 from Isotope through Splice for $10 a month, and I decided after using it for a month that I didn't like it, and that I already had tools that did what it does, and so I put it away. I stopped paying for it and took it off my account. So $10 wasted instead of $200 that I would have had to spend to try it out effectively otherwise. So, okay, enough jibber jabber. Let's get to some side piece here. So this track is side piece "Wanna See You," and Christian wanted to look at I think he's something about the dong sound, for lack of a better term here. Okay, it was dong 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 sound at 117. All right, so we're gonna pull up this track. I'm going to mute this track as soon as it comes up here. Hopefully I can get it. Yep. Before it starts. Okay. Okay, muted. Let's take it up to a minute 17, I think is what he said. Okay, minute 17. Dong, 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 dong sound. Okay, there's a minute 15. Let's unmute this. Okay, wait, here we go. Now it's going to play. YouTube isn't liking this. There we go. All right, let's listen to this. Oh, shit. Sorry about that, my friends. I think it's that bass there. Correct me if I'm wrong, Christian. $114. Okay. That's the. So it's the bass, right? Tell me if I'm wrong there. Okay. Okay, yeah. The donk, not the sub. Okay, cool. So, let's bring in. Okay, here we go. We're gonna load up Serum. Okay, and let's try a couple of notes here. Let's turn down the volume so I don't blast you guys out of the water again. So it sounds like it's an E. Okay, let's go to our basic wave shapes. We're going to go under analog to basic shapes. And now when we turn our wavetable position knob here, this WT position knob, we get some basic wave shapes, as well as maybe some not so basic wave shapes. But there they are. Okay, now let's listen to these sounds. Maybe it's F instead of E. All right, I think now maybe we're getting kind of close, right? This is where we start thinking about which of our basic waves is this closer to. Now, it's entirely possible the sound we're trying to make isn't going to be close to any of those. But to me, this is starting to sound a little bit closer. Let's come back to the track here for a second. Okay, maybe something in that direction. Let's throw a low pass filter on this. I think we're gonna want some sort of a low pass filter. Something like that. Okay, let's go back again. Something along those lines in terms of the pattern. Now, how could we make this a little bit closer? Maybe key tracking the filter, that might work. I think maybe there's something else there on the filter, maybe an envelope. Okay, and we're going to want that envelope to not be this very gate like envelope where it just kicks this cutoff all the way up and then back down when we play the note. We probably want something a little bit more, maybe less resonance. Mm-hmm. Maybe. Might even. Well, let's double check again. Hmm. Hmm. What's up, O'Sherry? Okay. Curtains. What's up? You made it. Okay. So this is a bass. We're gonna put it into mono mode. Now, there's something a little bit more there, and what that something is might we could try a couple of things here. One thing that we could try would be another unison voice, perhaps, and then we'll reduce the detuning. Hmm? Maybe let's double check. Maybe a little bit of glide in there too. Let's turn always on. That way we get a little bit of that. Might be a little longer than that though. Well, not that long. Might be a little bit shorter than that, I think. Might be a little bit too much glide. Envelope on pitch. That could be it. That's kind of where I was going with. Yeah, I like that too. I think maybe we'll put envelope 2. Here, let's turn off our glide. And we're going to take envelope 2 and we're going to put it up here, not on octave, not on semitone, not on fine tune. Fine tuning might work, but we're going to put it on coarse tuning. And this will give us smooth pitch change, potentially over octaves if we want it. We're not going to want octaves necessarily. And when I drop it there, it also sets this envelope into a bipolar setup. And if you look really close there, you know what? I can zoom in. We'll see if 300% size serum works. Oh, it did. That looks absurd. Okay, so if you look here, you notice we've assigned this coarse tuning to have the envelope assigned to it. But in the middle, there's this notch, and on either side, there's this kind of assignment, this amplitude assignment function, and this is indicating that this is a bipolar control of the coarse tuning. I don't know why this is even possible in Serum, or maybe not possible. Fine, make it possible, but for envelopes, I feel like it should not be the default function. It should be unipolar, right? We want this thing to rise from a 0 point, go up to 100%, and then come back down to a certain point, like we have on our filter over here. Let's shrink this back down a little bit. Right? This is going in a unipolar fashion, up and then back down. We could hypothesize for days why the same envelope, when assigned to one control, is unipolar, assigned to another is bipolar. Maybe they think on pitch we want bipolar control for something like vibrato. But that would probably be using an LFO, not an envelope. So we can come over to the matrix, and here, I think we did this the other day. We can click on this type button, which notice it's like two arrows going either direction. If we click on that, it should be unipolar. And now when we come back, it starts in that middle point and goes up and comes back down to that middle point. I think that's a little bit more sensible application of an envelope. Now, that said, we need to drastically reduce the amplitude because we don't want this to go multiple octaves or maybe even a whole semitone. But yeah, even that seems like kind of a lot. So maybe we will end up putting it on fine tuning. Let's set this to like 1. And this also might be a moment when we say, do I really want the same envelope to be assigned to the filter and to the pitch? I might want a separate envelope for the pitch. So we might want that to be shorter, for instance. So maybe we will remove that modulator. Option Shift on Mac at least to switch between unipolar and bipolar on here. So if I assign envelope 3, for instance, here, notice it went in there bipolar. And if we, I think on PC it's what? Is it still Shift Option? Yeah, Shift Option click. There we go. You can see that made it from bipolar to unipolar or back again, right? Same thing as going to the matrix and clicking this button, Shift Option click, okay, or Shift Alt click. Okay, and then we'll drastically reduce this to 1. Hi, cat. And then we will shape this envelope with a shorter decay because we want this thing to go up and down. That could be it. We might need to dial that envelope in a little bit more, but now we're getting a little bit closer. Let's see. Let's compare again. Okay, so I think we're getting really close, but now maybe we could go into the effects. There's a couple of things that we might be able to do here. One would be maybe a little bit of distortion. It's a square wave, so it's already going to be a little bit kind of pushed to the max, but just a little bit more distortion there, I think is maybe a good thing, maybe a useful thing. We could try one of these other distortion types. Probably also want to change our volume envelope because our volume envelope is rarely going to be this kind of in-your-face brick wall gate, and probably again pretty much closer to our filter shape. Maybe have a little bit longer decay. Okay, now the last thing I would say we could try is chorus. Now we did some unison detuning, right? We did that over here on the oscillator. We switched this from one voice, which is kind of flat by comparison, to two voices, which are slightly detuned in pitch from each other. So now we have two square waves slightly out of tune, one slightly above, one slightly below the note that I'm playing. This is kind of what clicked the wrong thing. Okay, yeah. No, wait. You're not supposed to be that far out. What the heck? There we go. Now we can really start to hear him going out of tune. Very close. But there's also maybe a little bit more of that. Now we could increase the voices, but unison, back in the old days when they didn't have a lot of resources, or including another oscillator, which is essentially what we're doing when we multiply the unison voices there, or when we have more than one unison voice, we're essentially creating more oscillators. And back in the old days, they didn't have the luxury of cramming 32 oscillators into a synth, maybe even two. They didn't have the ability to do that and have it be an affordable instrument. So chorus is kind of a poor man's unison. It was developed to give the effect of unison detune. Well, maybe it was developed for other purposes, but the one use of it, especially if you look at one of the classic applications of chorus, which is the Juno 106 or the Juno 6. The chorus is in there so that it will thicken things up a little bit, much in the same way that the unison detune will. So chorus is using one or two additional delays of a signal, and then by modulating the length of time between the original signal and the delayed signal, we can get essentially a very similar effect to unison detune. This might be a little bit much, so we could turn down the delay. Notice that the delays are measured in time, right? It's milliseconds delay. This isn't usually a feedback delay, but we can add that feedback to kind of give the chorus a little bit of interesting color and texture. It essentially thickens up the voices. Maybe we dial down the mix a little bit. Something like that. Okay, let's just compare. Let's go back one more time. Do our A/B. I think that's pretty darn close. We could even maybe put an LFO on the drive. And maybe we'll slow down this drive. Let's also re-trigger it. Maybe not that slow. Not that fast. That last note has that kind of effect on it where it kind of has a little bit of distortion that comes in after the note, right? So now let's just rewind for a second, because this is kind of putting together a lot of stuff. Whoops, a lot of stuff we talked about this week. We got envelopes, right? Volume envelope, and you can see kind of the overlaid lengths of these envelopes. Okay, this is our volume envelope, a little bit longer than the others, so that all of our other envelopes have time to get the job done, right? Envelope 2 is our filter envelope, so we get that frequency or tonal change while we're still hearing the volume of the bass, right? That effect of change in tone over time. Short amount of time. It's a second, but nonetheless. And then envelope three is doing a little bit of that pitch change. So, we could spend more time and maybe super fine tune this. I think the more we can A and B it, the more we have the luxury of getting it closer and closer. But um, to a certain degree, I'm trying to minimize that a little bit just to minimize the copyright claim chances. But that shit's all out the window anyway. And then it's a square wave with some slight unison detune and one additional voice. It's monophonic because it's a bass. That helps us make sure that we're not going to accidentally hit any clams, hit any competing notes in a chord like scenario, which, as a bad keyboard player, is a really kind of bad habit of mine. I will go to play one note and I'll miss and play two notes, and on the bass, that sounds really bad. So, um, simple wave shape, basic wave shape, a square wave, two unison voices, slightly detuned, volume envelope, pitch envelope, tone shaping envelope, and then a little bit of color over here with some distortion and some chorus. And, we're trying to keep it simple. This is, I think, the name of the game. Keep it simple, stupid, as James Carville will tell you, um, or would have told you back in the early '90s. Okay, so that was pretty close, I think. I appreciate uh, the the positive feedback. I think that was a pretty good one. Um, okay, side piece. Want to see you. Good sound. It's one of those sounds that you hear it and you go, "Oh shit." At least I did. I said, "Uh oh, this is going to be a hard one," but um, this is why it's important to do this process and start to try to use our landmarks to get closer, right? We just try to push it a little bit closer bit by bit, and hopefully we get there. Um, Sometimes that's a process of moving by inches, but um, yeah, good example. Okay, let's check out this other one that HR sent, which was, let's go back to it. It was Isolation by Cubinate. Cubinate Interference. Oh, no, wait, Interference is the record label or something. Okay, let's look it up. Is this like Cuban Nate or Cubinate, like we're going to make something Cuban or something into a cube? I don't know. I've not heard of this group before. Okay, Cubinate Isolation. And this is from Wax Tracks, which was like one of the OG epic record labels from the 80s and 90s. I think they were around in the 80s, right? Wax Tracks. Um, Cubinate Interference. 1998 Wax Tracks Records. Wax Tracks and TVT Records put out tons of industrial. You can see here's a track that features Leather Strip, Nine Inch Nails, and Cubinate. I don't know if that's a mashup or if that's like an original old track. I'm sadly ignorant of Cubinate. In fact, hey, while we're at it, let's just search up Cubinate because I want to know more about Cubinate. Industrial, right? Um, it's a band. Okay. An English industrial band from London, founded in 92. And here we'll see record labels, Wax Tracks, TVT, industrial techno, electro industrial. And if we look at the Wikipedia, it might tell us heavy metal guitars, techno percussion, including later incorporating breakbeats. The pair were replaced by Julian Beeston, ex Nitzer Ebb drummer, my good friend Bon Harris, his band Nightser Ebb. Um, you know, this is the uh, in the lineage clearly of EBM, electronic body music, not EDM, electronic dance music. This is back in the 80s. There is another style called EB, as in boy, M, EBM, and paired with Carcass, early 2000s hiatus. We don't need to know all that. Legacy and influence. Band toured with Fear Factory, Sisters of Mercy, Rammstein. Rammstein's singer is apparently in the hospital. Um, I'm not learning that from this. I saw that earlier today. So, our best wishes to all of them. All right. Well, let's take a look. Let's listen to Isolation. And we're looking for, let's see what he says here. If you ever have no other choices, I'd love to do the start of this song is doable on modular. Okay, so we might go over to the modular here. Let's take a listen. Okay, I can tell you right now, this is going to be a hard one to pull off on modular because the um, it sounds like there's a lot of voices there, right? It sounds very rich. Sounds like um, I don't know if it's a chord as much as it is a thick layering of tones, right? Just those two notes, right? And to me, though, it sounds like those two notes are pretty thick. The type of thing that you might need a digital synthesizer, especially in the early '90s, to achieve that kind of thickness. But let's see. You know, it might be just two sawtooth waves. Let's try to make it in Serum, and then we'll see if this is something that we can take out and do in the modular because this no, we're just getting to the industrial track, Wambra. You made it. Um, okay, so let's come over and we'll keep that sound there. I'll just start a new one. Okay, so I mean, to my ear, this sounds like maybe, um, you know, a root note and a perfect fifth and an octave above that root note. So um, let's see. Let's turn on oscillator B. Let's take it up an octave and up five, or a perfect fifth. It's plus 7 semitones. Um, let's maybe just load up our basic wave shapes here because this might be closer to a square wave, or it might be a layered square wave and sawtooth wave. Um, okay, and that one's not going to be as loud, but let's listen again. Okay, there's certainly also some reverb in there. So we can put on a little reverb. We could also maybe get a little bit of the flavor of a reverb by dialing up the release time on our envelope. But there's definitely still some reverb on there. So okay, now a moment ago when we were doing that other sound, I think it was Astrofish suggested key tracking on the filter. Oh yeah, I see it up there. This is the type of sound where that might make sense because we might be playing a higher note and then a lower note, and the lower note sounds like it's a little bit more heavily filtered. Let's go back again. Let's try turning on that filter. Let's try turning on oscillator B. We're going to route that to the filter. We're going to turn on key tracking here. So what does key tracking do? It looks for the note that we're triggering, and it will, if that note is low on the keyboard, it will bring that filter down closer to where we actually have it set. If we play higher on the keyboard, it's going to open up that filter so that we can hear the frequency content of those higher notes. So key tracking, you can see here I'm hovering over this button and it says filter key track. Or I think you can. Let me move this over. My face might be in front of it. There it is. Filter key track. So this little button, sorry, I forgot my face was on top of that. This little button ensures that when we play low notes, the filter will close on down. And when we play high notes, it'll open up so that we can hear those notes. Let's see. Okay, let's listen to the original again. I need to listen on both headphones now. Come on. There we go. The intervals are messing with me. Okay, and so now I'm thinking maybe these aren't sawtooth or square waves. Let's see. Okay, well, we are making an industrial sound. So I think one thing that will kind of grime it all up is going to be some distortion. So we're going to pick, let's see, tape saturation. Oh, let's see. Okay, this still isn't thick enough, I think. And so this is where maybe the unison voices start coming in. And this is where we start getting well outside of the range of something that we can do with a modular because those unison voices, each one that we add, right now we need two oscillators at least, two sawtooth waves. We're going to need more than that once we start increasing these unison voices. So let's we'll reduce the detuning, and then we'll just kind of increase these a little bit. Yes, I think that might be part of where we're going here. Let's try maybe hard clip. Okay, let's come back. Okay, might not be a perfect fifth. Maybe I'm imagining that. It's definitely got like that classic, was it Hoover or Reese bass? So we could try a different distortion, maybe folding. Way, yeah. All right, let's dial that way back. Okay, let's check. We might be going way off now. Let's listen to the original again. Ah, okay. There's maybe it's not a low pass filter because there is high frequency in there. This might be more of a notch filter. Let's try a notch filter. Yeah, there we go. Okay. Now we're getting there. So, this is one of those filter types. Might not be the most commonly used filter, um, but it's one of these ones that lets us create a sense of motion while retaining like tonal shape change while retaining the high and low frequency stuff, right? So. Some noise. Another maybe um, safe to assume element in industrial music, right? Like industrial music is, I think, synonymous to a degree with a little noise. So maybe we could turn on the noise generator. One funky thing about the noise generator in Serum is that it does not default to a um, a basic commonly used type of noise. We get this AC hum, which, excuse me, I think is maybe a little bit closer to turn up the original sound. Okay, thank you. The maybe a little bit closer to the um, uh, the sound of like an amp humming, um, which I think this is supposed to be like some sort of amp. Maybe I'm wrong about that, but we can use noise, pink noise, white noise, bright noise. If we look under the analog menu here, there might be plenty of other noises in here, but we could try white noise. Might have to dial it way back. Might have to send it through the filter. Okay, let's listen to the original again. Yeah, now I'm hearing that noise. Might be filtered drastically. To me, it sounds like maybe there's also a low pass filter up on the higher end, but maybe what we could do is take the built-in filter in this distortion circuit, right? There is a way to do that, Ben. We can just drag the reverb up here above the distortion, and then we get... Oh. Might also want this to be mono, because this is also a kind of a bass. Let's listen to the original again. Also maybe a little delay in there. Put that above the distortion too. Not quite that much. Anyway, we were going to employ this built-in filter in the distortion, right? We use a distortion to make something more harmonically complex, and they conveniently built this distortion with a filter inside of it. And if we switch to post, then this filter will be applied after the distortion. So we can throw a low-pass filter on here with maybe very little resonance. We can put it up on the higher end. Okay, let's do some close full headphone comparison now. There's still something. Let's try it. Try this one just a perfect fifth up. Might just be a mix of these things. Well, maybe we could add the sub in here. Let's try another square wave. Try turning the levels of these down a little bit. Oh, good call there, Christian. Direct out on the sub. What's up, Nathan? Thanks for joining us. I think it's a mix issue now. Again, maybe we put another filter after all of this. And maybe we could take an envelope or an LFO and have it kind of nudge that cutoff up and down a little bit. There is something lower. Oh, we have a cat squeaking. Gotta go for the lucky cat. See if this cat has any ideas. Hold on. We gotta get you on camera. There we go. The rarely seen Surge. You're a good boy. You're wiggly. You're wiggly. Okay, sorry. I had to do a Surge break there. Okay. Now then. So we have to consider this was made in the 90s, it's out in 98. Probably some some sort of signal chain in between the synthesizer and the the recording mechanism, right? Might be this is a pretty big band, big label. It might have been that they had a nice mixing board. I mean, back then these records were made in a studio, not in a bedroom. So it's quite possible that they had a mixing board, that they had some sort of outboard gear that they're processing some of this with. Could just be input gain distortion into the yeah. Dancing Baby is dancing on Moog back there. Rude. Um, so, it could be that there's, there's some sort of a an unknown signal routing here that isn't necessarily achievable in Serum per se. We might need a preamp. We might need a some sort of compressor that was used to send their synths into the recording device and get um, you know some tonal change as a result. So uh, that's where this all starts to maybe slightly become more difficult. We might need to tweet at Cubinate and see, how did you guys record this? What was your signal flow? We might be able to do a search and find other people talking about it, but that's probably easier on tracks that have a whole lot of views and popularity. But that's where this starts to get a little bit hard to parse exactly what was that little bit of distortion. Were they doing EQing in the channel strip on the mixing board when they were recording it in? Were they using the built-in limiter on the channel strip on that mixing board? This is the type of thing that if we have a preamp plug-in, I think the other day we tried one of these Arturia pre's. We could try putting one of these on here and overdrive the input signal, the input gain, and that will kind of create its own distortion and color, which is maybe a little closer to what we could find in that example. I mean, also worth considering, it says in that description that we read on Wikipedia, lots of heavy metal guitars. So could even be like a fuzz pedal distortion on the synthesizer. So we could try. Maybe we turn off this filter. And we could use these things to kind of lower the trying to find uh, something in the style that they were going for, right? Um, let's see. Used to always want to discover what gear the industrial artists were using back in the early days. Um, yeah, I think it's less about the gear, more about um, being able to create a similar signal flow, right? I think it's useful to know the gear in the same way that it's useful for a guitarist to know the type of guitar, the type of amp, the type of maybe even the strings, maybe the pedal signal flow. So I don't necessarily see this as a chase for the exact routing, though sometimes it's interesting and educational and nice to be able to recreate those things as close as we can. But um, this is about uh, trying to get into the heads of the artists who we love, right? And so, in that sense, we don't necessarily need the gear. We don't even need the right plugins. But there are times when we want to recreate these sounds, and I think it's more an exploration, as you're saying, Wambra, less about having all that gear as much as about an endeavor to discover what might have gone into that thing, and in that, there might not necessarily be a right answer. We're also, I think, trying to um, infer intention in the mind of the artist, which as fans, as listeners, we always do that. We assume the artist was doing everything with intention and meaning, and everything came out the way that they had expected it to come out. And that's, we would think, of course, why it has that effect on us, because they meant to have that effect on us. They meant to shape and craft these things in the specific ways that we hear them. But this is like music theory, right? We're trying to get into the head of an artist who maybe has no interest in explaining themselves to us, and maybe made a lot of mistakes, accidents, happy accidents, accidental discoveries in the process of making music. Right. This is something that might not have come from uh, finding a preset as much as assembling together something in an interesting way that might never be assembled that way again um, by that group. So, it's kind of like music theory in that we can think and talk and analyze all day why Bach made the decisions he made, but um, all of that is kind of pissing into the wind in a sense, because we can never ask the man. We can never get a straight answer. We can only infer what from what he's written or told other people who have written about it, and that's a long, long way away from making stuff because it feels right, or because it's fun, or because it's an exciting adventure down a path that we might not have taken. So, this is all in a in an effort really to show maybe the simple route to getting some of these sounds, but the process for the artist might have been very complicated, or it could have been super easy. They could have loaded a CS80 preset on the instrument that the studio had, and they said, "Oh, I like that. Let's use that." And then that's what came out. Maybe the artist had little to do with the tonal shape of the sound, and it was all about the engineer in the room who kind of dialed it in to be the way that it sounds to us. This is all hypothesis at a certain point, but I think it's important to kind of endeavor to piece some of these things together, and it could be a real sound, it could be a fake sound. So, and I think, yeah, Wambra makes a point here that origin stories often diverge from the reality, right? Like telling the story about how a record was made might be completely made up compared to how it was actually made. The even, of course, like the the normal origin story of a group or of an artist or of an act could be completely made up, as it often is. Um, yeah, there's the A440 standard tuning and the conspiracy theories that go along with that. It's always a fun discussion. And if you ask a classical music historian about such a thing, they would giggle about about the 440 tuning conspiracy theories, because in the classical world, tunings have been slowly creeping up based on um, instrument design, based on the effect on the audience. It's kind of like the compression wars. Whoa, it's kind of like the compression wars in that everyone is trying to get a little extra energy to wow the crowd, and at a certain point, that comes from playing it a little faster, a little bit more intense, a little bit higher frequency. It makes the crowd, sit up a little bit and go, "Ooh, what's different about this piece this time? And so, if you go back to Baroque instruments, they're they might not be capable of playing in 440 because they are more potentially delicate instruments, and if we tune them that tight, they could break. So Baroque music, um, uh, uh, on traditional instruments, is often played at a lower tuning. There's this whole conversation about that. It's more important to consider what sounds right to you. If it's 432, then go for it. But it's all relative. Ultimately, the tuning relationships are still relative, and so it almost doesn't matter what the tuning is in terms of the way the notes interact in traditional scale based music. But that shouldn't stop you from making those changes if you feel like you like how it feels or looks in when vibrating sand on a plate. But a lot of those things might be um, uh, tricks of the eye. The vibrating a plate of a certain size at a certain frequency might look different than vibrating a plate of another size at a certain frequency. We're talking about resonant frequencies here. So, what we see isn't always what we get in YouTube videos and things like this. But um, all of that is completely irrelevant if it sounds better. So that's all it really is critical at the end of the day. Okay. Well, we made a couple more sounds. I think we got pretty close to that one, but that was a good one. That was a challenge. Those industrial sounds are sometimes pretty fiery, sometimes hard to make. There's a lot more going into that sound than the previous sound, but um, maybe that's just luck. Oh, I like that outlook, Mark. It's very true. Time is relative, right? So yeah, I think there's I totally agree with you on that. There's something very malleable and shapeable in that way of thinking, and so yeah, it's all about what feels right, right? Sweet. Yep, it's a mutually agreed upon value, just like money, right? It's vaporous in a sense. So the it's about your intention. I think it's a what's the guy on PBS, the power of intention, right? The artist's intention sometimes is all the time, frankly, is the most important thing. So, um, well, that was fun. I hope that was useful for you guys. I hope that was some valuable time spent. Send me some more examples. We'll do some more next Friday, if not sooner. And the we'll keep it all going. We're going to be back here again tomorrow at noon. Um, if you guys are ever struggling to find the live stream, if the YouTube doesn't feed it up, you can always go to the website, voltagecontrollab.com. I have made the changes that I suggested that I might make earlier in the week. So you can just go to the website and you can view the live stream from there if YouTube isn't serving it up for whatever reason. But um, we'll see if we get another copyright claim on this video. I talked to a really lovely fellow who has a channel called Guitar Gate. Um, really love his channel. I'm not a guitarist, but I saw he was doing these kind of by request taking apart of uh, of you know, big guitar tracks, tracks that people want to challenge him with. And he's been doing some Fish songs and Grateful Dead. He's been doing a lot of like jam band stuff lately. Fish is a particularly complicated uh, band when it comes to composition, so it's really entertaining to watch um, a great guitar player like him try to analyze a Fish track in real time. But I was chatting with him because he does these videos in a similar nature where he's watching some other acts work and trying to play along or recreate what it is they're playing. So I wrote to him and asked him about the copyright claim issue, and it turned out he went to Musicians Institute back in the day. So um, the yeah, we'll see if we get another claim on this one. I, of course, don't hold any of the artists responsible for that. It's the digital distributors that, uh, and the content ID system ultimately that has control over that. But we'll see, and hopefully, either way, the video will stay up. And yeah, let's find out. We're going to find out in a couple of hours here. But all right, well, tomorrow we'll be back. If you have any ideas what we should do tomorrow, do you have any requests? Let me know. Maybe we'll finish up the techno track from earlier this week. Next challenge, Fish tune on the modular. That is a challenge. But I don't know if you guys have ever seen Fish. Their keyboard player has a hell of a synth rig. They replayed a video from 2012, I think, recently, and he had a mini Moog or no, a memory Moog on his B3 organ, and was playing it. So I think they have a surprisingly large amount of synth stuff going on in their tracks. But um, hey, if you got a sound from a Fish track that you want me to recreate, we could go for that. I've also I've been waiting actually for when we do a track composition live, and we need a chord progression because I think we might just steal a couple of chords from a Fish song. They have a really twisted minds for chord progression shaping and melody writing and soloing and all those things. So, all right. Well, tomorrow we'll be back at noon. Thank you guys so much for joining us here, and send me some more examples for next week. Some more tracks and sounds that you want to recreate, and we'll keep it on going. All right. Thanks, you guys. Have a great week. The week is over. Have a great rest of your Friday, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.